Welcome to The Aftermath, a podcast that rips the Band-Aid off the collective scars of divorce, custody battles, and the trauma of family drama. Kindra Riber and Mick Smith pull back the curtain and explore stories that put the heart-wrenching puzzle pieces together with inspiring stories, notable experts, and actionable tips. Let the healing begin. Well, welcome once again to The Aftermath. I am Mick, the Doctor of Digital Smith, and our legislative advocate, Kindra Riber. How you doing today, Kindra?
I am wonderful, Mick. I'm feeling a little excited about today's episode. It's going to be a little different. So I didn't even put the title behind my name today because I'm coming in a different way.
Yes, but I know who you are, and I know what kind of car you drive, but I'll find you. So, yeah, you're the legislative advocate. It is a little bit different today. So, yeah, we're going to do something a little bit different because Kindra is the star. We already know that, and I'll have my 2 cents in as well, too. But actually, we're going to
You're a
have Julie
star.
Lokun.
You're a star. You're discrediting yourselves. We're both stars today.
Everybody is a star, a Sly in the Family Stone. Okay, we're gonna have Julie Locum, who is from the Mediacasters, and she is actually going to be interviewing us. And that's why I'm saying our format is a little bit different today, but be that as it may, welcome everybody and glad that you're here today. And with that, we're going to introduce Julie from the Mediacasters, our investigative reporter. Hey, Julie.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with two amazing people, amazing human beings who are changing the landscape and the conversations for people who are going through very difficult times with breakups of their family units. And I'm honored to be here.
We're honored to have you here, as is very different for us and it gets a little bit of focus on us that we're not used to. So fire away, ask away what you want, and we'll go
I
from
get to just go, I get to rip it.
there.
The
Yeah, rip it.
aftermath, the stars of
Huh.
the aftermath.
Rip the
Yeah,
bandage off. We're
I,
ready.
I
Yes.
love this. So, Mick Smith, he is the author of Burning America in the Best Interests of the Children, question mark. And Kindra Riber, legislative advocate and also host of this podcast. I know she's doing some amazing things. I'm going to start with Mick because I find his story fascinating. I find the synergy between both of you quite illuminating. Mick, why do you why do you focus on this topic? What was the onus? I know the background of your story and I know the story of Burning America, but why are you still so passionate about this topic after so many years? And I know your child happens to be a young adult. What is the onus for doing this?
That is an excellent question, investigative reporter, and that's a very probing question. So, yeah, I wrote this novel years and years ago. So I would tell everybody the first thing I had no idea what I was going to do with it. It's a story, and I wrote it out, and there's no question about it. It was catharsis. I just had something inside of me that had a burning passion to get out, and I thought, well, this was totally unbelievable. I can't believe that all these things happened to me, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. Well, to answer your question, lo and behold, my very best friend in the entire world, and he is the best friend that anybody could ever have, the same exact thing. I mean, virtually the factual details of my story became his story. And I told him, okay, this is what's going to happen. I know you're not going to believe me. And I know this doesn't make any sense because it doesn't. But almost the same exact scenario happened to him many, many years later. And I said, I've got this story that I've been sitting on for a long time. It helped me a lot. And now my very best friend in the entire world, who we actually have interviewed on the aftermath,
Mhm.
also is
Great
experiencing the
episode.
same thing. What's that?
That was a great episode, by the way.
Oh, he's phenomenal. What can I say? I mean, I'm
So,
just
where you
fortunate.
walked him through it as he was going through it in real life?
I sure did, and I told
Wow.
him exactly how things are gonna play out, and this is without knowing who these people are, who the players are, who the attorneys are, his exact
Mhm,
situation, but I just said, "Okay, here's what's gonna happen. This is how it's gonna go, and I'm gonna walk him through it."
mhm.
And it's a little bit of harsh, is what people probably call tough love, but since we're good friends and we have been for so long, where neither one of us are trying to hurt each other, we know that we're looking out for their best interests, and he took my ideas to heart, and it probably helped him a lot. But that's what really convinced me that, I've got a story. If it helps my best buddy, maybe it can help other people as well
Wow.
too. So I wanted to get it out. And then I guess probably having a background, I say I'm a recovering academic, so I've always been
Mm.
interested in, culture and history and what has happened to this great country. So, I mean, I just have a real passion for younger people and always have trying to help them. So it's kind of related to that as well, too.
Wow. No, it's a great book. I happen to have a copy of it as well. What drew you to your co-host, Kindra, to start this platform?
Well, that was an interesting question. And that's where Julie, the investigative reporter, comes into play because there was already a connection, and I said, "You were the one who really brought us together," and that's why I thought the collaboration made a whole lot of sense,
Mhm.
and I do think that Kindra is pretty phenomenal because she's got a real ability to able to sympathize and empathize with people. She asks really good questions, but I also thought that the combination of these scenarios from a different perspective, even though the circumstances are the same, might be helpful, and by that I mean a lot of people look at these issues as gender based, that it's for moms or for dads. But is it, you got to forget about all that. It's for these kids. That's the most important
Yeah.
thing that's going
Mhm.
on. But I think her perspective and my perspective really brings a depth to this issue. And you can see from different perspectives from a mom and dad, male, female. But I think it's a great combination as a result.
And I believe, isn't it mostly men who are, I'm not going to use the word victims, or who are targeted for parental alienation,
I
or being the deviant parent, if you will?
I think that's still the case. So
Mhm.
the statistics say that, but I've always said this from the very beginning, and that's why I said I looked at it because when I was saying I was going through it, yeah, I thought, yeah, the whole world is against men, they're against fathers, and
Mhm.
yes, statistically that's true. But if you forget that and get yourself out of the equation, as difficult as that is, and emphasize the kids and the children, those are the victims, and that's
Yeah.
where the emphasis has got to be because not only Kindred, but then I've also come across other women and other mothers who have had the same exact situation, which was really extremely poor. And
Mhm.
my point is, it really doesn't matter because the court system and the entire process is completely corrupt. And it doesn't really matter. And I don't think you should think about it as male, female, rich, poor, or anything
Mhm.
else. It's got to be for the kids and it's entirely for them. We're just not doing a good job for them. That's how I look at it.
Mhm. I always say, why can't people love their children more than hating their exes?
Yep.
What's the problem here? And it is an epidemic, as you guys know. So Kindra is probably one of the, statistically, you are female and you have been a part of the parental alienation targeting, if you will. Have you shared a lot of your story with the public? And of course, share what you feel comfortable with. But I happen to know you, and the story that you have shared with me is like a punch to the gut every time I hear one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. And this woman that I happen to know before me, she is a stellar human being, and it just doesn't make sense. So I would love to hear Kindra's perspective of being a mom who was targeted as a bad parent or egregious parent.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. It is, what drives me is because I am very different from the statistics, right? So typically it is men you hear about. But what has motivated me to do what I'm doing and do what I've done and share part of my story on a one-on-one level is because I started sharing with a few people and then they go, "Oh my gosh, I know somebody that's going through this. I know another woman that's going through this, or I know I have a friend that's gone through this. Can they talk to you? Can they reach out to you?" And my story is pretty extreme. It's pretty severe.
Mhm.
I was in my opinion, great mom, right? We all make mistakes. We're all human. But I was a pretty dang good mom. I had 2 boys, and at the age we separated was 10 and 6. And I was involved in horse camps and STEM camps and after school activities. I was at all of the school functions, birthday parties, right? Even though my kids' birthdays were in the summer, I would make sure I contacted the teachers and we celebrated during the school year so they could be recognized and just those little things, right? We would have birthday parties with our family and both sides of the family would come. and it would be themed. I know one time it was a ninja party, one time it was all camo, and we got my son a four-wheeler. I would do different things. And so it was really surprising to me when my ex came to me and said that he wanted to separate and he was talking to somebody else at the time. And from that point on, things got messy. My children were asked to call her mom, that they had a new mom, and they were told things that started kind of a brainwashing process.
Mhm.
First, it was dad's crying because we have to leave him to come to your house and he's upset. And now dad's passing out at the store because he's not taking care of himself because now his girlfriend left him. Things like that, that psychologically the kids feel that they have to then take care of the parent. I'll never forget when my son came home one time and he goes, I have to call dad. And I said, why? He goes, I have to check on him. And I just kind of laughed. I said, don't you ever check on me? And he goes, no, mom. He's like, you have friends and you go do things and you have a good job. And at that point, I realized that Amy J. Baker, who's a psychologist that goes into parental alienation pretty deep, and anybody that is going through what they think is parental alienation should listen to her and read her books. I think she's got 4 or 5 of them. They because it nailed it on the head. They align with the weaker parent and they know that that stronger parent will always be there for them.
Is that the mentally weaker parent or physically weaker or
It's mentally weaker, I think, rather than physically, but it's not that they're really weaker. They're just playing to their children's inabilities to psychologically sort out what's going on, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
and to align with them. So I cannot tell you how deep and how crazy it's gotten with lots of police, one family calling and threatening the other family. So as of right now, I have not spoken to my children in about a year.
wow, my heart goes out to you. How do you cope with it? I mean, I know how you cope with it because you're one of the things you're doing is you have a podcast and you're speaking out and learning and sharing the message. Because I never heard of parental alienation. I've never heard of it until I really started having conversations with Kindra. I'm like, oh, this is weird. But then I realized it's almost like a trend now or a buzzword because it is coming into the consciousness of the masses.
So here's the thing, it's always been around. It's just finally
Mhm.
late. Parental alienation syndrome, they're trying to get written into the psychological DSM.
Oh, wow.
And so it's diagnosable because at this point, children can take it to it could be taken to a horrible degree. I just actually listened to a podcast where a 10-year-old child, because he thought he feared his dad, even though it was proven several times that the allegations of abuse were false. The child was so fearful because of what the mom had said and done and created in his head that he shot his dad in the back at 10 years old 5 times. And they said, why did you do it? And he said, because I was afraid of him. He wasn't afraid. It was parental alienation.
Wow.
So it's always been around. It just hasn't been labeled. And there's a fine line between talking bad about one parent, right? Because everybody that gets divorced, we know that it's very hard to not say anything bad about the other parent. But this is taking it to a whole other level where, again, Julie, as you said, it's using the kids as weapons to keep them from the ex and hurt the ex versus benefiting the children by having two loving parents. And that's what they had before. And a divorce just sends that into a spiral. So, what have I done to cope?
Yeah.
Therapy,
Ice cream?
helping others, ice cream, lots of ice cream, working out, yoga, walking, hiking. You know, at one point I had chickens and I just watched the chickens. I would go out and just peace and watch the chickens walk around just to be in a quiet
Mhm.
zone. Mick and I have talked. I think music helps too. It's just there's a wide range of things that I've done to try to help. But one of the biggest things is when you are disconnected with your children is trying to keep that connection somehow. So a lot of what I did was journal to them. I am now trying a little something different this time, but previously, I have several journal books to them, talking to them about what I did that day, what I missed from them. what we used to enjoy together, things like
A and it's so interesting. I mean, I'm glad that you are testing the waters and doing a lot of different things, and it's so interesting to me that it seems like it is pre-calculated pattern in which you can kind of see, "Okay, this is how it's gonna start, this is what's gonna happen, this is what's gonna happen," and then the kids are permanently alienated because the courts are not equipped to handle reunification. And it starts with bad mouthing the other parent, lying to the child, expressing anger, withdrawing love to pull the child away from the other parent, disclose disclosure of personal adults' information and litigation details, and requesting that the youngster call the alienated parent by their first name, like, like, "Oh, hey, Kindra. Hey, Mick," from your child. And I remember thinking, I have a friend who is going through this right now, and he's knee deep in hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation fees because they said that he inappropriately touched his daughter's leg. And it turned out, that she is accusing people at school. She's got a lot of mental conditions now, but it's still so entangled, and it's like you can't pull free from it. It's one of those, do you know those, like, little, what are they called? Like the Chinese handcuffs, when you pull, it gets tighter and tighter.
Mm.
There's just a pattern, and I don't know why the courts aren't able to do anything. What do you both think about this in terms of, like, resolution? Is there any resolution, or what's the answer?
I don't know if I have an answer, but I would say one of the things that has changed pretty dramatically, and I would say because at my advanced age, I see this, people were very involved in their local community. My parents had always been political, not in the sense of political parties, but very involved. That is, in their school activities, local organizations, volunteer activities, and things of that nature. So, if you think about things even from a previous generation, there are all kinds of volunteer organizations, the Shriners, the Odd Fellows, Knights of Columbus, and all these groups. And there's a great book by a Harvard psychologist who talked about, and the title of the book is Bowling Alone. So he takes the phenomenon of bowling, which is something which is not all that popular anymore, but he was showing that almost everybody bowled. In fact, I can tell you this is true. My grandmother bowled. She's not really an athletic person, but people were part of bowling leagues. And the importance there was the fact that people were very involved in their local community. They ran their local community and the schools and the local institutions. And what has happened in American life is that we are now not doing all of those things. We're too busy. We're too stressed with our jobs, our other responsibilities, our families, and other things like that. So we're not a part of our active local community as much as we are before. And it's something like, well, there's a gap now. And what takes over that gap is usually then the government institutions and state institutions. So I'm not saying I necessarily have a solution, but I do think one that is either voluntary based or somehow local community based. So your local synagogue, your church, your people that are somewhat not a part of the governmental structure or a court system, but someone who could be a mediating influence. And I think that at least is a possibility to help out in this. What I think is what you described earlier. I agree. It's an epidemic because it's out of control.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that as the core systems are making it worse, much, much worse. So, as Mick alluded to, if you were involved in your community, I know I was heavily involved in my community. I will say I'm an old soul then. And I would run into teachers in in Hobby Lobby and different, areas where I was out and about. And they would just start crying for me because they knew what a good mom I was and they couldn't imagine this happening. And it's really because I think the courts get involved. Everybody gets afraid of them being sued or something going wrong. And once the biggest step in parental alienation now is once allegations of abuse, whatever abuse that is, right, are filed, you now are treated guilty until proven innocent, which is very different than what we're taught. And the children are pulled away for that amount of time. I had to fight that twice. So in a total, I was away from my children for a year and 7 months.
Why don't they put the kids with a neutral party? Why do they put them choose one parent?
You know what? Because it really depends on the county. It depends on the judge. It depends on the states. States are now seeing this and a little bit more coming to terms that this is happening. Kentucky actually just passed it where they're 50-50 in the last couple of years. And because they're 50-50 from the very point of separation, they have seen a decrease in um, criminal activity in their court systems from divorces. They've
What
seen
do you
it.
mean by 50-50? Like, explain that to me.
So 50-50 is not just visitation. 50-50 is your custody arrangement too. So they have equal say from the very beginning. Right
Mhm.
now, it's typically somebody gets custody, as in they can make all the decisions for the children. And then somebody gets a visitation. And depending on that visitation, it could be half the time, it could be a third of the time, it could be whatever you work. What we're moving to, and we're seeing across the United States, is now it's 50-50 equal. Everything on decision making, all the way down to visitation, and it's set by the parents. So the parents need to agree. So the biggest advice I would say is if you're going to divorce, no matter what, try to work it out with your ex and try to come to a solution that you guys propose, that you agree to, versus one person having complete control over the children.
And there's a distinction that can be made legal versus physical custody. So supposedly, legal custody means that both parents are able to make decisions in terms of healthcare and schooling and things of that nature. And then one person will get primary custody, that is physical custody. So there's a distinction there. So in my case, what I found out, well, then you have this problem with the court orders or so called court order because the person who was opposing me ended up taking the child out of the school that was in, didn't know anything about it, had to get her back into her school, started making health decisions on her own. And sometimes there were injuries on her own, which I didn't know about, none of which is supposed to happen. So, naive me looks at the so called court documents and I say, well, okay, I've got supposedly legal custody and I'm supposed to be involved in these decisions. And I always found out belatedly because I would get the bill. I go, oh, well, I guess there was some sort of medical emergency. It's like, why didn't I know about that? So there's some distinction there, but I give you an idea of statistically and how this has gone out so out of control. In 1960, 92% of children were raised in a two parent household and the people were married. In 2023, that percentage is down to 67%.
Yeah, but they were all miserable back in 1960.
Well, I don't know. I was alive in 1960. I was pretty happy. But,
I mean, like, it's
from
the parents that stayed together just because.
because they had a commitment to one another. I'm not saying
Yeah,
they have to. I mean,
yeah,
I'm just saying work out
yeah.
what you can. But from 1960 to up to the present, there's increased fourfold in single mother
Mm,
households. So,
mhm.
again, it's not to say it's a gender issue, but I think children need what Kindra is saying. It's a 50-50 access. And that means you have to have the ability and access to both parents because here's an example I always give. I mean, this makes sense to me, but you take the kid to the playground, right? So what does the mother say? The mother says, be careful, watch out you don't fall. And there's nothing right or wrong about that, but that's something to keep in mind. What the father generally says, go have a good time, go for it. Now, I'm not saying that's right. What I'm saying is that the child, if they have access to both parents on a multitude of issues of all kinds of things like this, the child is thinking this and taking in input from both a mother and a father, and hopefully they're making the right decisions along the way. And I think I can make an argument that they have to have the 50-50 access to both in order to make intelligent, rational decisions based on their age and their maturity level.
And I understand why courts have to be so cautious. If they hear the word child abuse, they have to immediately respond to that, right? And again, proven guilty, you're guilty before proven innocent. But it's taken to such extreme levels. Now, first of all, I want to know Mick. So Mick went through this a while ago, a couple decades ago. Tell me how you healed and how you fostered a good relationship with your daughter. And the story goes that his wife died and the alienation ended, right? So you were able to take control of everything. What was that story the past couple decades with your daughter?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot easier in a sense because I didn't have someone who was antagonistic. But unfortunately, and of course, I had nothing to do with this, but it's a tragedy. And I would never have wanted a child to be raised without a mother. It just, that's the way it worked out. So she passed away at a very young age. But I think there were certain advantages. Again, hindsight is 2020. But not only that, it just worked out in our family anyway, because as it happened when our child was very small, because we only had one child. When she was very small, I had an academic position that didn't start for very long time down the road, months down the road. So from about the time that our daughter was 10 weeks old, mom was working double shifts because she had a job that was in high demand and she worked double shifts. So I was taking care of the baby, literally 10 weeks old until she was about 9 months old. There was no one else. I was alone with her. So that meant I bathed her, I fed her, I changed her, I washed her, I did all of those things. So it was an unusual position in a lot of ways, but a real advantage by hindsight because that made the transition that much easier because it wasn't as much of a transition as much as it was, well, we're just going back to what we had always done when she was very small. That it was turned out to be a 3.5 year period from 1998 to 2001 that I was alienated. And when she got back, returned to the home, well, then it just got back to what I would call normal. So it was probably the most challenging, but the most rewarding time ever because then I think I saw our child really start to do very well. Her schools improved, her scores improved, her grades improved, and all those things went really well. So, I mean, just a little bit of bragging, she class valedictorian in high school and went to a very prestigious Ivy League school. A lot of people would consider the most prestigious Ivy League school. So it was a lot of
Wait, I didn't know
ability.
this, Mick.
What's that?
Dang. I didn't know this. I mean, I expected it, of course, because you're
Well,
brilliant,
it
so
but, like I said, don't say it that often, but I mean, if you
awesome.
wanna just say, in quotes, "success," by all social accounts, that would be considered a success, and it was very frustrating going through a process like this because if I'm going to the courts and the counselors and the attorneys and everybody saying, "Look, just give me the kid, return her home because I stayed in the marital home. I never left." And so what I was trying to point out is that here's the stable environment. I know I'm only the dad. I know I'm only one parent, but I can do this. But that didn't happen until unfortunately we had a tragedy that interjected. And then that's how she was returned home.
Wow.
But it meant that I was trying to provide a stable environment for her because I had never taken her away from my wife, and I never would do that because I think that's just an extraordinarily cruel thing to do to a child. I would never do that, but it never happened that way, and unfortunately, things worked out the way they are, but it was less of a transition, I put it that way. More challenging than ever, but also more rewarding and, to see the child prosper and grow up to be in a very independent and, living her own life kind of world.
Wow, that's fabulous. Well, you did a good job, and I'm interested to hear what her future holds or what she hopes it holds.
You know, there's different ways to approach this. So I'm doing a lot of research. And one of the things I've taken out of the equation is court. I've been in court for 4 years, spent $190,000 plus, had a reunification counselor, a guardian ad litem, three psychologists for the kids, a custody evaluator, which was a psychologist, all which did not work out. And so after spinning my wheels, court is not the answer. And so I am going other avenues. There's other professionals out there that have some other ideas that are outside the court that are reuniting the children with parents today that have been alienated for several years. I am learning and getting some information from children who have been alienated and they are now adults on how to handle the situation. What's the best way to go about it? What things do you say? What things do you not say to the children? How do you handle your ex in the situation? Because no matter what, you're going to have to face them again if you're going to see your children. So just trying to go about it a little differently.
Wow. And your strength just it's gonna create a ripple effect. I know that for sure. So what is next for the Aftermath duo? You are using different mediums to share your word, to advocate for what you believe to be right. What is next for each of you?
I don't know who wants to start on this, Mick.
Yeah, either one.
Let's draw some straws, guys, because I know you're making such a difference with this podcast. I
No,
see
I
that.
know.
Oh,
Julie, you just threw us. Usually you were directing one or the other. So
no, it's the
come on.
both of you. It's the Donnie and Marie of parental alienation.
I think from my standpoint, it's so hard for me to create a platform or a business that charges parents to learn how to cope and for me to mentor them that are going through alienation. So I do it for free because my heart goes out to them for what they're going through. I get calls weekly about I run out of money. My husband's taken my kids. They hate me. They're, calling me by my first name. They don't want anything to do with me. What do I do? And it breaks my heart when I hear from women and men that are going through this. And so I haven't decided my platform yet, but as of right now, I want to give back to those that are going through it and struggling because where I was 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about it. I've only learned and educated myself. And so if they're reaching out for help and they know that I've gone through it, I think I can empathize with them. And as Mick and I have talked several times, if you try to tell somebody that's never gone through it, they don't really believe you, right? It's questioned. Well, maybe they did do something or maybe something did happen or, are they really telling the truth? But if you actually talk to another alienated parent, the exact same story repeats itself. Like I swear all of these other parents that
It's
are
formulaic. It's formulaic.
yes, it is. It is formulaic. They are doing the exact same thing. And so if you talk to another alienated parent, we can almost say the exact same thing the next time, right? If they're talking about it, we can finish their story for them because that's what happens. It's the same thing. And I feel horrible. So my mission is to help as many people as I can that are going through it and give them direction and point them in the directions of the professionals and myself and just be an ear that they can talk
I
to.
feel like you could write do you remember those books, Choose Your Own Adventure?
Yes.
Like, okay, you could there could be books. So, if your ex does this, go to page 72.
Yep.
If it
Yeah.
does this, go to page 65, and all the answers are right there for you.
Yep.
So, wow, amazing, amazing. I know you are going to be a leader in reform of this whole legislative mess, if you will, in a lot of these states. One more question for Kindra. What is like the best state to live in and the worst state to live in this situation? If you know.
And you brought up something I didn't even think about. From a legislative standpoint, I am doing some things. I don't know if parents know this, but you can actually file complaints with the Supreme Court if you are upset with your judge, attorney, guardian ad litem, anybody that was involved. You can also file reports with your on your counselors with the psychology board. And so there's different things you can do there. And then I'm also fighting from a legislative standpoint for the state of Ohio to change the law. And that's going to affect many parents that I won't even meet or begin to mentor. And what's the best state to live in? The best state to live in right now is Kentucky.
Oh,
Because,
wow.
yes,
Winning
because
them all.
they have adopted the 50-50.
Mhm.
And so they are equal shared parenting. And the worst state to live in right now is, gosh, any of the others. No, I
49 others, right?
I know Texas working to change it, Ohio is working to change it, but really Kentucky's who we wanna model after, or Arkansas. They also have adopted it.
Wow, who would have thought those southern states would be at the forefront of reform? No, that's amazing. Good to know. And Mick, how about you? Is there a Burning America part 2? Is this going to be a series?
Oh, I thought if anything, the short story or 2, but yeah, I'm doing other things because I write a lot. So this has more to do with what Kindra was saying earlier about how do you get through these things. So you have to find some sort of outlet. Physical activity is good. I
Mhm.
average about 5 miles a day walking and I
Oh,
write a
wow,
lot. So I
that's
mean that
fabulous.
really has a lot to do with, yeah, stay healthy. Look out for number one. When you're in the airplane and the things come down because there's so-called emergency or there's an emergency, who do you put the
The
mask on
oxygen
first?
mask?
Yeah, the oxygen mask. This is the thing that's really counterintuitive. You have to put it on yourself first, and the
Mhm.
inclination of a parent is to put it on the child. But what they point out is like, well, if you're gone, you're no good to your child. So
Yeah.
look out for number one. And that's kind of the idea here. So stay healthy, get your sleep, do all the things that you have to do to stay positive, stay healthy, stay strong. Don't let fear get to you and things like that. And to answer the question a little bit differently, you asked Kindra, what's the best state to live in? The worst state to live in is the state of inaction. That is, if you look at life, life is pretty straightforward. If you move, you live. If you stop, you die. So you have to move. You have to do something. And it's that hope that there is something down the road which is better, which is very, very hard for people to see who are going through this parental alienation thing. If you read my story, I pulled up in my driveway and everything was gone. I mean, literally everything, bank accounts emptied, furniture, everything is gone from the home. All of which I said, okay, well, I'm going to be philosophical about that. Had $5.85 to my name, but the child was gone. That's the only thing that mattered to me. So my number one goal was to get that kid home. And the only way to do that was to stay healthy and stay strong. So I had to look out after myself in order to get that time was coming back because no one thinks it's going to work out. And, you never know because things could work out. And one of the things I was thinking about when I talked about my best buddy, in his case, the things that the courts say and the psychiatrists say, and this I agree with Kindra saying, this stuff makes no sense. There's a lot of bad actors out there. In my best buddy's case, the woman who took off, his wife, took off with the child, and she didn't want her child, so called, to be around one of my best buddy's children, who's a special needs child. That was a big negative for her. That
Mm,
just makes no sense. And the courts had no consideration whatsoever for the family unit or the fact that there was another child involved. And this is what you have to understand. There's a lot of bad actors out there,
mhm.
bad attorneys, bad psychiatrists, bad judges. And if you have an outlet and some way to get file a complaint against them, you should do that because that's an action that you can take and that's something that you can do. So whatever that happens to be, and I always say to everybody, and I say for the aftermath, we always try to end this or some on this note. You are not alone. Don't think that you're alone. You're the only person in the universe going through this. And that's how you feel, but that's absolutely not true. Somebody is out there, myself, Kindra, or anybody else who's been through this will help you and will reach out. And I feel the same thing as Kindra said. It's really awkward. And you feel like, well, I don't want money for this. Although you realize financially it's devastating because you go through this process. And like I'm saying, I had zero money, absolutely nothing. And then several months go down the road. And then all of a sudden the court sends you a bill for thousands of dollars and say, you're in arrears of child support. I go, well, she already took the money. Well, that doesn't count. Now I'm starting from not only zero, but below zero. And it's very difficult to financially get yourself back on the track that you want to. But that's what you have to do. So buckle up and keep moving. That's all I can tell you.
Buckle up and keep moving. And thank you guys so much for letting me take a little peek into your lives and everything that you are doing for other people who are going through this situation. And I have a topic proposal for you guys for your next episode, which would be parental alienation and intact families. I heard that this is a real thing too, when the family's actually intact, if you will. And when I was doing a little research before this meeting with you guys, that is fascinating. And I see how that could happen. Well, first of all, because I know kids are manipulative too. Like if there's no communication, that's where a lot of stuff happens. Oh, dad said this, mom said this, getting mad at each other. I would love to hear that on one of your future episodes. But I
Oh,
am your biggest fan, the Doctor of Digital, Mick Smith and Kindra Riber. You guys are amazing. And thank you for letting me be here with you today on the aftermath.
thank you, Julie. It was awesome. Thank you, Kendra.
Yes, thank you. It was wonderful, Julie. Thank you for letting us share our stories and share a little bit about ourselves. We don't get to do that very much, do we, Mick, on our own podcast?
We don't, but we don't like to be the stars, but the stars are the people listening, and hopefully we can help them.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. See you guys.
Bye
Day
bye.
is full.